Alrighty. One sec. Let's turn that off. Okay, can you hear me? Oh. I don't know what is going on in the rest of the house, but I've got a real strong smell of like dust and feet. I don't know. Oh. Anyway. Yeah. Real big trigger warning for section 4. When we get there, there's a lot of similarities and some mention of events that might bring up the events taking place between Russia and Ukraine at the moment. So if you need to leave before then or just like not participate in this one at all, there you go. Yeah. Oh, also, if I sound a bit weird, I'm not sick, but like I've got some junk stuck in the back of my sinuses at the moment, so that would be why. Also, again, if you hear clicking and stuff, it's this little guy. Yeah, I keep coughing up stuff. It's not fun. Anyway, oh, thank you for the hugs. So, yeah. I do have my notes up, don't I? Right? That is what this one is? Yes, it is. Okay. Come on. Alright, so we've got 3 and 4. Okay. There we go. Alright. Section 3, we were offended by Solnit disparaging camellias. Camellia means beauty in the language of flowers for a reason. It does. It does. I mean, I don't know what was happening before, but now it smells like veggie burger, so I'm not mad at it. Maybe it was like a weird oven smell or something. Anyway, moving on. I don't remember that part, but I do know there were a few sections that I was having a hard time tracking the audio. So that might have been one of them, admittedly. Yeah. Just because not anything to do with the audio itself, just like for whatever reason my brain wasn't latching on to that particular part of it, so there we go. Also, we've been thinking about how the cultural focus on blooming keeps people stuck, not growing up, and ripening into delicious, juicy fruit. You have a point. Especially when, like, the bloom of life and whatever tends to be associated with, like, no. Depending on the society that you're in and that the metaphor is supposed to be existing in, it can range from, like, childhood through, like, young adulthood, or just be associated with virginity in and of itself, which is a whole other thing altogether. But yeah, no, that it's very rare to see like positive depictions in literature of a flower fully blooming and maturing into whatever fruit that particular plant has in the metaphor. Because most of the time it's just, yes, the bloom of whatever, and then they have been deflowered and then it cuts off. Because that's not problematic at all. Because at that point, there's the implication that, just as histories kind of try to get people to believe, after one's deflowering, there's not really much beauty or worth to the individual. So there's that. Which is a whole load of BS. Just as a thing. Clearly, clearly you deleted it from memory because slander. Right. No, camellias are pretty amazing, really. And just like the just checking this thing everywhere. Just the petal arrangements and everything. 40 finds us ripening into a tasty apple we like. Yeah. Yeah. Apples are good. Trying to figure what, like, what would I do with in that scenario, and not coming up with much of anything, honestly. We'll have to cogitate on that. But yeah, no, the whole emphasis of, like, which is weird, right? Blooms are, like, seen as really delicate, and, like, when flowers are related to people, the bloom is really delicate and fragile, and if someone's kind of coming out of their shell, then they're blooming into whatever they're gonna be. and then the deflowering. So like slightly open flower, and then most of the time. Or it's like there's an association with spinsterhood, whatever that even means anymore. And like the flower is withering on the vine. Like, really? Really? Okay. But if you look at like actual plants, right? And being that we're talking about roses, let's look at the rose, for example, here, right? In the bud state, the flower is about the most protected that it really can be at that point, because everything's like wrapped around it and all that. So it's able to withstand a lot more. And I mean, you could make the argument that that could be symbolic for people too, you know, because like if someone is associated with a bud, like a flower bud, then there's the community surrounding them as a protection. But like just the flower itself is a lot more vulnerable in the more advanced stages of existence because, you know, petals fall off and everything. But also, that's just what happens as flowers develop into themselves and whatnot. So there's that. Chose the apple because mystical symbolism and wisdom and stuff. Yeah. But there are other kinds of plant buds like meristems. Exactly. Exactly. And I mean that, like, yeah. That's a whole metaphor set that, far as I know, just isn't explored for some reason. We'd rather be budding tree branch than flower, to be honest. Yeah, seriously. Like, if you're, and that's the thing too, because most of the time it's like, ah, yes, the gentle rosebud. Like, well, you know that one's only gonna last for like a couple of months max, right? And then it's gonna die versus like the beginning stages of a branch on the mighty oak tree or a yew or whatever sort of tree there. So like, yeah, I think I'd rather go with a branch at that point too, just as a thing. Well, there we go. But yeah. So we've got the budding and the weird emphasis on the flowering parts, which excuse me. Like, just as an aside, right? The the idea that there's so much emphasis on flowers, especially like cut flowers, for events as like a gift thing. Because there's sometimes that it totally makes sense, like if it's a wedding or some kind of other major like life event thing or something like that. Just because by their very nature flowers are associated with like the reproductive possibilities of the plant and whatever. So like the blossoming of a creative pursuit or people or whatever. But like the like yes. Here, friend, have the reproductive parts of a flower as a thing. But yeah, they're pretty, but also very evanescent. Yeah, yeah. And evanescence might not be the association desired. Yeah, there's that. There's that too. Just like there's the meaning, there's the association of like okay, and the transient nature of blooms in general, but especially cut blooms, because like they tend to not last all that long as a thing. Yeah. Oh, okay. One sec. Okay. You know those times that like there's just 2 or 3 eyelashes just in your eye? That's what happened. Anyway, what's your favorite flower part? Uh, let's see. Just because sometimes the names get turned around in my head. One sec. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, all the structures are pretty interesting just by virtue of what they do and whatnot. But the sepals are always an interesting thing because they're not always there, or they might be like it might look like part of the petals or what have you, but you can see what part of like the evolutionary tree they're on. They're the little darker gray bits down here. What's be your favorite on that one? Yeah. Yeah. Alright. Yeah. So admittedly, it's been a while since I've really read anything to do with the um, American suffragette movement. And what I did read back in the day was like civics textbook stuff, which admittedly isn't that great. So yeah, well, high school era was a lot better, but then it was the entirety of US history, quote unquote, in like 1 year. So yeah, 1 semester really. Uh, pistols because homophone. Petals because pretty and silky and sometimes even tasty. Yeah. There's still a suffragette movement. As far as I'm aware, not in the US, but there might be in other areas that's not a thing. I'm not entirely sure. So, yeah. Not that I've heard, but then news sources coming into the US are a bit off sometimes. So there's that. But I did find it interesting that Bread for All and Roses Too was the slogan for it. As like a because I think I've heard it in passing, or at least some mention of bread and roses. But that's the first instance that there was any kind of that's the first instance that there was any kind of real context to it. And the idea that it was bred for like physical sustenance and well-being and everything, and roses for like joy and passion and whatnot, because in at least up until that point in most Christian influenced areas, I suppose, it was the we don't have to worry about happiness and joy and whatever in this life because we're going somewhere else later, so it's fine. So just eat the bread and like worry about everything else later. Like, but why though? you know, just But why? Recognition that things that spark joy are also essential. Yeah. That was a big one. So yeah, no, I totally appreciate the inclusion of that. Like, there's as a whole chapter unto itself. Like, yes, very much. And also just kind of jumping off that, there were some Orwell quotes in section 3, chapter 3 of bread can be managed by authoritarian regimes, but roses must be something individuals are free to find for themselves, which goes directly into that. And we only know that apparently I did a typo when transcribing this. Is that the imagination? It's gotta be that. We only know that the imagination, like certain wild animals, will not breed in captivity. So, yeah, there we go. Okay. Even today, as a disabled person, we're supposed to spend all our money and energy only on food, shelter, meds, and the like. Yeah, like the idea that there's this weird idea that if you're able to spend money on particular non-essential things, then you can do, whatever. When a lot of times the non-essential things are either connected to like just general mental health maintenance or otherwise health and well-being. Anything is just mind-boggling. And they like now I'm speaking from an American perspective in this, so like that's the bias here. But I'm pretty sure at this point most of the world is aware, at least in part, of like the kind of janky nature of the American financial system and weird antagonism to any kind of public assistance to anything. So there's that. But like back in the day when the minimum wage was like initially conceptualized and became a thing, it was designed to be the minimum wage that someone could earn and maintain a decent quality of life, And now there's people who are making the argument that if you're working minimum wage, then that's just there for like high school students and presumably just high school students, or otherwise uneducated, quote unquote, people, and that because of that you shouldn't be able to afford to live on your own with minimum wage. That and the whole like BS attempt at an argument that people with intellectual disabilities specifically, because I've heard disabilities in general, but it ends up being intellectual disabilities generally, should be paid less somehow, because that makes sense in people's brains. Yeah, because the whole point of the system in and of itself was totally not so that people could actually afford to exist and thrive in society. Anyway, fuck the Puritans, Calvinists, etc., and their legacy. Yeah, like, like, I want to say that there's some redeeming thing that comes out of like each of the iterations of whatever, but really, people, yeah, the paying people with disabilities less for the same work makes no sense. Yeah, and it's not even like a fewer hour thing, it's for the same amount of hours, the same exact work, everything. Yeah. Like, what? I don't know. The mental gymnastics that it takes for people to rationalize particular viewpoints, right? And this isn't even like in context of the disabilities in working or current political events or whatever. Just like in general, right? The mental gymnastics it takes for someone to rationalize what the majority of the world, I would say, sees as a complete BS argument that either uses like some kind of fallacious data or something that was disproven like ages ago, or is just blatantly made up on the spot. And like, why? Just why? I mean, at that point, like, I know why, at least generally, it's a control tactic at that point. But like, why people go along with it? Especially after the last couple years, like, the... with the last, like... 3 years, let's say. The number of, like, the straw man arguments and plot holes left in whatever kind of narrative is being spun by a whole bunch of people is mind-boggling. But, well, there we go. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I know it was mentioned in probably section 1, chapter 1, but prior to that, like, because we never discussed Orwell in any of my classes or anything. Oh, wait, one sec. The chat is trying to escape. What was it? Oh. There's a thought that it's not quite formulating, and I'm trying to figure out what it is in order to say it. It's not even that the words are jumbled, it's like, okay. Back to the notes. Yeah. Like, I know in part it's, like, I never had a class or anything that was emphasizing Orwell. There was always mention of Animal Farm being a important text and all that, but like, it's interesting that he was fighting in the Spanish Civil War and all that. And it's also interesting how Solnit kind of, it was like parallel storylines almost. Well, yeah, parallel biographies, I suppose, with Orwell and his wife in Spain, and also Medity in Spain. but based in Mexico. So that's the thing. But yeah, about to get into some more political stuff, so reiterating the trigger warning for current events. Yeah. So. Don't think he was actually married to Botany. No, it seemed like it was parallel. Like Botany was there on the Russian side, and Orwell was there on the Spanish side. Or like the Russian influence side and the Spanish side. Because at present, I can't remember Orwell's wife's name or Botany's Russian person's name. Because she was involved with a Cuban national, I believe. And then he was assassinated, and she was on a ship, presumably, to go to Russia and met the other guy. And then there was presumed, like, there was a potential that the dude that she ended up with might have been the one to execute her first lover. So yeah. Seems like she would have had to do a lot of mental gymnastics to survive. Yeah. Yeah. Because you've got a woman in the middle of a war situation, which, especially at the time, would have been a whole mess of things. And B, like, the potential for multiple allegiances and all the rest of it, so yeah. Yeah, no, a whole lot of mental gymnastics and like rationality and everything. Also, right, we've got, with Orwell being in with Orwell being in a position where he was and writing and everything, there was an odd sort of dichotomy there, and like an irony that in that particular war, yeah, the people who started fighting for freedom and liberty and everything under the communist banner ended up having to ended up aligned with one of the most restrictive and oppressive governments in history under Stalin's rule. It was amazed that 2 plus 2 equals 5 was a real thing. Yeah. Like, I've seen that as a metaphor a lot of times of, like, this person was so brainwashed that they thought that 2 plus 2 was 5. And, like, no, that's a thing. That's that's a historical thing. And just the idea that that was an active tactic in the Soviet Union as a psychological manipulation of the people. Yeah, like, the, just, yeah. And along with that, there's, like, on top of it being a supreme irony, you have the additional idea that for anyone who went against the Soviet Union, anyone who went against the established narrative that they were trying to push and tried to actively fight against that oppressive regime that was being established, you were imprisoned and or executed. The Not Lamarck guy who started rather than Eat the Seed Bank, and those who protected it after him were way impressive. Yeah, no, again, I vaguely remember hearing something about that during my my ethnobotany work, but there's definitely gonna be at least a video coming about what's his name? Vavilov? I need to go back and reread that section. But yeah, Vavilov. If the notes that I wrote are phonetically correct, that's his name. And just the idea that the Lamarckian perspective fit more with what narrative Stalin was trying to do. So that's what got pushed, and apparently is still kind of a thing that's alive and well in at least parts of Russia. Rather like the whole flat earth thing is, and other BS scientific conspiracy theories. Anyone who didn't paint the roses red sounds like the Red Queen was a commentary on Stalinism too. Was it the right time? Yeah, no, totally. Totally. Yeah, no, and just, okay, right. with the whole, like, paint the roses red because the wrong ones were ordered, or plant the flowers, or in this case, plant the lemon trees, to make sure that Stalin's alright and they don't, like, and he doesn't kill off people because the trees died. Like, sir, you're in Russia trying to grow citrus trees. Basically, you're trying to grow citrus trees in an area known to kill off invading forces with winter. Bruh. There's a reason that citrus is a Mediterranean sort of climate requiring species, or set of species. The citrus species, yes. What? No. Don't do that. I would make lemons grow in Russia winters by toughening them up. Yeah, no, like, Stalin, just, bruh, you're trying to use because America type logic on lemon trees. It's not gonna work. It's just not. I don't know what to tell you, dude. The tree that survived deserves a Medal of Honor. It does. Seriously. Like, the comment that I wrote down on here, right? In the notes. Like, when your gardeners have to approach their head of state like a 5-year-old whose parents don't want to tell them their pet fish died, so like they go get another one so that they don't, get killed off, you're doing something wrong. Just saying. Like, just putting that out there as a thing. Like, and the idea that, I mean, am I really surprised? No, because dude seems to want to model everything after the friggin' Soviet Union. But, like, the idea that certain parts of that are being replayed again because the current leader of Russia is attempting to recreate the Soviet Union. And apologies for the epic clicky, like, right next to the mic. I keep forgetting that it's, like, right there. God. And the contents of the text are current because it came out in, like, what, October, November last year? Especially the punitive effects on Ukraine. Right? Like, like, can you not with this, dude? Seriously? Can you not? understand the need to to epic clicky right now. I know, it's just like it helps me, but I know that there's sometimes that particular sounds like really don't work for other people, so like I don't want to trigger that, but like also uh okay, one sec. Gotta mute. Need to blow my news. Un momento. Also, I'm glad that I've just taken to keeping this thing just right there next to me, because I keep forgetting to bring it in here when I do stuff otherwise. Ah! Yeah, no, it... Anyway. Yeah. But yeah, that's... Oh, yeah. The final line of Part 4, Chapter 3, right? Lies mutate more freely than seeds, and there are new crops of those as well. Which it didn't sound from the context that it was an Orwell quote, so I'm pretty sure that's a Solnit quote. You know, the author. But yeah. Especially with the state of things at the moment. Point of use organization is great for busy brains. It is. It is. I'm getting slightly better at that. But like, yeah. Seriously. But yeah, no, it... Bumper crop of lies. Exactly. Okay, so like, I've got a political cartoon idea stuck in my head now, where it's like someone making rye bread, but instead of rye bread, it's made with lies, so it's lie bread. Which, you know, depending on how you spell it, if it's bread made with lye, then it would be poisonous. So there's that too, and it's just in there. No idea for like the rest of what would be in the thing, but that is a thing that exists in my brain right now. So like, there we go on that. Especially because if you're trying to feed people lies that have a negative impact on everybody. Ow. Just whacking myself in the knee with the thing. And the wheat can spontaneously become rye thing was also mind-boggling. That's another tie-in that I forgot about. Yeah. Yeah, no, seriously, like, I really don't understand when people are trying to use this stupid flat earther logic for stuff. Like, and the I get it for like 17 something when you don't know how giraffes work. And like, oh, this one has a really long neck. I've never seen anything like that. And they get to the leaves that are way up there. So they must have like stretched eventually to get there. Okay? There's a few holes in there, but alright. You're trying to make sense of your environment. But like, when the science is here, and then you're like, yeah, but what about this one over here? This like random theory that hasn't seen the light of day for 100 years. Yeah, we should use that instead. That makes more sense. That totally works and stuff, and doesn't negate the last however many 100 years of basic logic. And I'm still I'm still annoyed at Melville having Ishmael keep calling a whale a fish for like 500 pages. Like, yeah. Goes with the science is lies propaganda. It is. It, like, yeah. It. Oh. And then you have the actual scientists that are like, but what, huh? How did you, what? That makes no sense. But yes, if science is lies, then, the scientists would be going with the science, obviously. So the scientists are liars. So we can't trust them. What? Actually, what? Yeah. And just the idea that science is lies as a thing. Like, I mean, it goes back centuries, to, the original time that the whole debate of whether or not the Earth went around the sun, or it was a Earth-centric or a heliocentric universe. With Copernicus, like actually before that probably, but that's the first, big one that most people are aware of. And it's still going on now. Yeah, Copernicus and Galileo. There we go. If one side uses science as propaganda, then they assume all science that doesn't agree with them is lies. Yeah. It's a very dangerous position. The lack of nuance on the internet is a meme, but it's also very dangerous. Yeah, no, totally. Like, it's one thing if it's like, if there's a sarcastic thing being said, like, oh, well, obviously, this here indicates that this other thing happened. But, if it's just text and there's no, like, intonation, and there's no, like, tone markers in there, it's hard to tell with that, Especially when there are people who hold views that science is lies and whatnot. Like, on top of which, it's like in highly religious, especially like if it's an Abrahamic religion, specifically Christianity. Not gonna lie here. Because the other two seem to be a little bit more logical when it comes to science. But for like conservative Christianity, you see a whole lot of that. At least, stateside. I mean, I remember being a kid and taking part in a project in Texas and being told like, oh yeah, like, that dinosaurs, yeah, they never existed. Like, God just put their bones in the ground to confuse people. Like, is your deity that petty that he's just like going out trying to mess with people just because? I don't know. But yeah, no, it. Yeah, and like for ages, I just thought that was like a weird fringe thing, but apparently that's a thing that is taught in some areas. Weirdness. Anyway, but yeah, it's having open dialogue and open like discussion for scientific thought is so important. And when you close it off, or when it's restricted because the science isn't supporting a particular logical fallacy, that's one of the big times that you get so many issues. Like, if you look at the Hebrew scriptures, yes, Yahweh is that petty. Yeah, no, I believe it. Yeah. Like, but yeah. Fair assessment, yeah. But like, at the time, right? Because like, I'm real into dinosaurs now, but like, I wanted to be a paleontologist at that point, and it kept going between paleontology and marine biology. So like, you're telling me, who has a whole collection of like dinosaur things and books and whatnot at home, that like dinosaurs are a made up thing by a petty deity that just wants to mess with people. Alright. It's a weird hill to die on, but alright, whatever. And like, it was at a church mission thing to like build a playground for some kids or whatever. And the rest of the kids sitting around me were like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense, yeah." What? Like, dude, I've played dinosaurs with you. Stop it. I don't know about the rest of these people, but you sit down. Like, what? Understand the seduction of not having to think, though. Sometimes turning a brain off sounds so nice. Yeah, no, like, I get that. And the not having to think and whatnot. I know when that in particular hits, the best thing that I usually do is like put on some like random show and do crafts or whatever. But yeah, because then at that point, suspension of disbelief is real easy. At least, in my experience, because you're already like in the headspace of wanting to not have to actively think about stuff. But yeah, that's the thing. But yeah, no, like I understand the draw, especially if it's like there's things going on and there's conflicting information coming in and you're trying to make sense of everything, and because there's conflicting information coming in, your brain's just going at like all kinds of speeds. So like, oh, okay, well this person seems to be some kind of authority, or they're seen as some kind of authority, or they're making themselves seem as some kind of authority. So like, all right, we'll go with that. And that becomes the main info source. But if that source is wrong, especially if that source is wrong and does not admit that they're wrong, or actively spreads false information, then you get an information vacuum sort of system. That doesn't seem like the right phrase. Echo chamber, I suppose. Having empathy for Madadi, not Stalin, just to be clear. Yeah, no, totally got that. From the sounds of it, she had a rough time of it, just because. Yeah, no, Stalin was like. And I forgot that Diego Rivera and Tolstoy, no, Trotsky, there we go. Just to be clear, I have it straight in my brain, but like the Russian names switched around in there, so there we go. Yeah. Well, an echo chamber does tend to vacuum reliable information from the system. There we go. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's what it is. Echo chamber is reflecting the same sound back at those in the echo chamber. The vacuum is just kind of like removes things from, yeah, space. Wow. Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, I mean, at that point, it's bad enough when one is existing by itself, but when both of them are existing simultaneously, it's. Oy. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the end of my notes. Ow. Yeah, no, there were so many parallels between the current stuff with Putin and discussions of Stalin, which, you know, from what has been said, the guy would probably take as a supreme compliment, which it's really not. But, you know, there you go. We go back to a bright point, Velenov's seed bank prevailed. Yeah, no, he's definitely gonna be a topic of discussion, in at least one video. Depending on what I find, maybe a podcast episode too, we'll see. Yeah. On the pod thing, right? I mentioned in the Discord that I was working on a couple of different scripts and a blog post and stuff. For that particular, it was the sunflower, because I was already wanting to do a thing about sunflowers, just because they're pretty important, like, economically. But with the associations, currently there's that too. So, if we've got, and thanks for popping the Discord up in chat, but we've got sunflowers associated with Ukraine and the current war, opium poppies associated with the opium wars in China and all of that, and the mass destruction that Europe wrought there. Roses. I mean, it could be argued that the Spanish Civil War would have rose inferences, but that's mostly just because Orwell. So right now I've got the War of the Roses for roses, and the poppy for World War One, and it was already existing from the first war, so for World War Two, but it came out of the First World War, so to focus on that. So if there's any other plants that have associations with that, yeah, it because it's kind of a ready food source, and I think there might be some kind of dye that can be made from part of the sunflower. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but they grow pretty fast. So they're a fairly important economic plant, but they're also the national flower of Ukraine. So you have all the symbolism of sunflowers growing in disturbed soil and removing toxins from soil and whatnot. So there's that there. Yeah. So if anyone has an idea for additional plant things, that's a thing. Yeah. I'm trying to get the podcast back up and going. Anyway, anyone else have observations, things to add, random announcements, and whatnot? Or not? Because that's about all I've got for right now. Oh, however, one of the folks that I follow on the Instagrams does crochet and does crochet patterns and was already going to release a sunflower pattern, but upon being informed that the sunflower is the national flower for Ukraine, all proceeds for the purchase of said pattern are being donated to, I forget which charity it is, or which humanitarian relief situation it is off the top of my head right now, but everything's being donated to Ukraine. And at least through March. And in my version, I've got one petal left to do out of 8, and then the middle part and stuff. So yeah, it's very cool. With Bread and Roses slogan, would say roses work for Russian Revolution. Maybe. Yeah, no, I'll have to look at that and see if there's another one that would work better, would be more associated with that. But yeah, no, that could work. Finished book for next week. Sounds like a plan. Sounds like a plan. All right, what do we want to read after that, though? Was that... I know it was discussed. Why do I have... What? Okay. Yeah. Rare and commonplace flowers? Does that sound right? Okay. Alright. Sounds good. Alright. So that's where we are with that. So yeah, if you want to take part in the discussion and whatnot for the rest of Orwell's Roses, that'll be next week. And or Around Commonplace Flowers by Carmen L. Olvera. That is going to be the next book. So yeah. Anyway, thank you for hanging out and participating in the chat. It's been a fab time. Do we want to rate somebody or no? I don't know. Anyway. Alright. Up to you. We're going to bed. Yeah. I'm gonna go do a food thing, so. Yeah. Alright. Have a super. Yeah. Have a fabulous rest of your day, whatever time it is, wherever you are when you're watching this. Thank you for hanging out, and I will see you all later. Have a good one, everybody. Bye. And remember, 5 to 7? Yeah, 5, 6, and 7. Or sections 5, 6, and 7 for next week. Yeah. And if it lets me actually type. There we go. Alright. Have a good one, guys. I will see you later.